Here's a football fact that'll make you stop. No player in NFL history has ever carried the ball more than Larry Johnson did in 2006, 416 times, nearly 1,800 yards, 17 touchdowns. It made him a star, and it may have also destroyed him, because the carries that cemented his greatness also ended his prime. How did one of the most unstoppable backs in football disappear almost overnight? And what does his story reveal about the real cost of NFL greatness? Larry Johnson was built in a football household. His father, Larry Sr., was a high school coach who later worked at Penn State and Ohio State, and from the start, toughness was non-negotiable. Football wasn't just a game in the Johnson household, it was structure, discipline, and the expectation that pain was something you pushed through. At Penn State in 2002, that upbringing came to life. Johnson exploded for 2,087 rushing yards and swept every major award for a running back. But what stood out wasn't just the numbers, it was how he got them. He wasn't a finesse runner. He was a downhill hammer, lowering his shoulder, running through contact, and daring defenders to survive the collision. In one stretch, he ran for 257, 279, and then 327 yards in consecutive weeks, a video game stretch that made him impossible to ignore. Defenses stacked 8 men in the box to stop him, and it still didn't matter. That kind of punishing, collision-heavy style thrilled fans, but left scouts quietly asking the same question. How long could a body hold up like that? Still, scouts weren't unanimous. His style was violent, his workload already heavy, and the whispers about durability started before he even entered the league. Was Johnson built to last, or was his fuel already burning too hot? Kansas City made the bet in the 2003 draft, taking him in the first round. But timing worked against him. The Chiefs already had Priest Holmes, the best back in football, fresh off a record-setting stretch. That meant Johnson wasn't walking into the spotlight. He was walking into a backup role. For a player who had just bulldozed the Big Ten, it was frustrating. He wasn't drafted to wait, but in Kansas City, that's exactly what he had to do. And until the opportunity came, Johnson's power was a promise, not yet a reality. Larry Johnson's NFL career didn't start smoothly. Buried behind Priest Holmes, he barely touched the ball. Head coach Dick Vermeil even took a public shot at him, saying Johnson needed to take the diapers off. For a first-round pick, it was a humiliation, and Johnson never forgot it. But in 2005, the depth chart finally cracked. Holmes went down with a neck injury, and Johnson was thrown into the starting role. The opportunity he'd been waiting for arrived, and he exploded. In just 9 starts, Johnson ran for 1,750 yards and 20 total touchdowns, averaging over 5 yards per carry and hitting the 100-yard mark in every game. He wasn't just replacing Holmes, he was rewriting what Kansas City's offense looked like. The signature moment came against Houston, when he ripped off 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. Before the game, teammates remembered him pacing the locker room, repeating, "They'll see today. They'll all see." Then he went out and proved it. Johnson's style was punishing. He didn't dance or cut away from contact. He leaned into it, lowering his shoulder and daring defenders to survive the collision. The more the Chiefs fed him, the more unstoppable he looked. By the end of the year, he was a Pro Bowler, team MVP, and Kansas City's new offensive engine. But there was always a contrast. Holmes was the soft-spoken veteran beloved by fans, the kind of player easy to root for. Johnson was brash, impatient, and harder for the city to embrace. Even at his peak, he felt like an outsider in Kansas City's story. And when things turned sour later, that difference would matter. But success had a catch. Once Johnson proved he could handle a heavy load, the team leaned harder on him. LJ had proved he could carry a franchise. In 2006, the Chiefs would find out just how much one man could carry, and what it would cost. 2006 was the year Larry Johnson went from star to centerpiece. The Chiefs built their entire offense around him, and they ran him into the ground. That season, Johnson logged an NFL record 416 rushing attempts. Add 41 receptions, and you're looking at nearly 500 touches. That's not just workload, that's a full-body experiment. On paper, the results looked historic. 1,789 yards, 17 touchdowns, another Pro Bowl. But hidden behind those numbers was the toll. Johnson averaged 26 carries a game, meaning 26 collisions every Sunday with defenders trained to hit at full speed. Unlike other teams that rotated backs, Kansas City rarely gave him a break. First down, Johnson. Second down, Johnson. Fourth quarter with a lead, still Johnson. The wear was obvious if you knew where to look. By December, LJ's yards per carry dropped nearly a full yard from the season start. Short weeks punished him more. In one 3-game span over 15 days, he carried the ball 102 times. For perspective, the average NFL starter that year finished the season with about 250 carries total. Johnson had absorbed more hits than some runners take in 2 years. Inside Arrowhead, nobody questioned the strategy. Johnson was the plan. Run him until defenses broke. But the truth was, the breaking point wasn't just coming for opponents, it was coming for him. Looking back, 2006 stands as the high point of his career and the beginning of its end. That record-setting season made him untouchable in the moment. But every carry was another tick on a time bomb, and the explosion came fast. At the end of 2006, LJ looked like the future of the franchise. He was rewarded with a 5-year, $45 million extension, the richest deal for a running back in the league. But the bill for 416 carries came due almost immediately. In 2007, Johnson suffered a serious foot injury that cut his season short. For a back who relied on explosion and power through contact, it was devastating. His burst dulled, his second gear vanished, and the dominance of 2005 and 2006 never returned. The numbers told the story. After nearly 1,800 yards in 2006, Johnson never reached 1,000 again. The 9-game streak of 100-yard performances that once terrified defenses became a distant memory. Within 2 years, the runner who once carried Kansas City looked ordinary, slower, easier to stop, and no longer the player opponents feared. And off the field, the headlines grew darker. Johnson faced multiple arrests, including several tied to assault allegations involving women. He was suspended for violating team rules and fined for controversial remarks. Each incident chipped away at his reputation, turning public opinion sharply against him. By 2008 and 2009, the frustration was visible everywhere, in the locker room, in the media, and in the stands, where boos became a regular soundtrack at Arrowhead. Johnson had gone from centerpiece to scapegoat, from fan favorite to one of the most criticized figures in franchise history. In November 2009, the Chiefs cut ties, placing him on waivers just 3 years after his record-setting season. There was no celebration, no farewell tour, just a quiet ending for the man who once carried their offense. But Johnson's story didn't end with his release, because what came after revealed that the toll of his career wasn't just measured in yards lost or contracts voided. It was measured in something far more lasting: his mind. For Larry Johnson, retirement didn't bring peace. It brought symptoms he couldn't ignore. Years after leaving the game, he admitted there are 2 entire NFL seasons he cannot remember: 2007 and 2008, completely gone. Not highlights, not details. 2 full years of his life, erased. The problems ran deeper. Johnson described rage that hit without warning, crippling headaches, and stretches of paranoia that left him unable to trust people close to him. He said whole conversations would vanish from his memory just hours after they happened, like living life in fragments. These weren't normal aches of a football veteran. They sounded like something darker, the symptoms associated with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. Then came the words that stunned even longtime followers of his career. In 2017, Johnson said bluntly, "I could be Aaron Hernandez." It wasn't said for shock value. It was his way of admitting he feared the same brain trauma that had turned other players violent could consume him too. For a former star to compare himself to one of football's most infamous tragedies showed just how much fear he carried about his own mind. And yet, Johnson hasn't stayed silent. Instead, he's used his story to warn others. He's spoken publicly about mental health, about the hidden costs of football, and about the scars no stat sheet ever shows. He's credited his daughter as his anchor, the reason he pushes through the fog and tries to reshape his life with purpose. For him, the legacy of 416 carries isn't a record in the stat book. It's the proof of what a human body and mind can absorb, and what it can lose in the process. Larry Johnson's story can be told in one number: 416 carries. At the time, it looked like proof of toughness, a record that crowned him as one of the NFL's most feared backs. But years later, it reads differently. It looks like a receipt for the touchdowns, for the wins, and for the memories he can no longer recover. Football celebrates the highlight reel, but it rarely shows the bill that comes after. For Johnson, greatness and destruction weren't two separate chapters. They were the same story, written in the same season. And that's why his legacy forces us to ask, how many more players will pay that same price? If you want more stories that reveal the hidden costs of football greatness, check out more of our videos. And don't forget to subscribe, because every week we uncover the untold side of the game.